are some actors whose style and body of work lend themselves to certain characters or types of films, while on the other side of the coin, there are certain roles that are simply crying out for specific actors. Hell, actors often end up publicly lobbying for them themselves. However, that doesn't mean that a casting announcement can't come completely out of the blue and take you by surprise. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and these are 10 recent movie castings you did not see coming. Number 10, Liam Neeson in The Naked Gun. There is nothing off the table when it comes to seeing movies remade and rebooted. If a project is popular or financially successful, chances are it will go through the whole process again, something that happens with varying levels of success. It can't be too surprising then that a reboot of The Naked Gun is being put into production, and with Seth MacFarlane as an executive producer no less. However, the original goofy slapstick comedy relied so much on the immeasurable comedic chops of Leslie Nielsen that choosing the lead for this project would be crucial. So who could bring to life the same silliness as Nielsen did as Frank Drebin? Though he may have worked with MacFarlane on multiple different projects and has certainly proven that he can thrive in comedic roles despite a typically more serious background, Liam Neeson wouldn't have been the first name that sprang to mind. Yes, he is incredibly talented, but The Naked Gun became iconic for such a specific type of comedy, one that it's hard to picture Neeson in. And if the reboot does move away from such tone and style, it simply won't feel like a Naked Gun movie at all. Clearly, MacFarlane has faith in his casting choice though, and should perhaps be given the benefit of the doubt for now. Number 9, Catherine Lagaya as Moana in Moana. Considering the fact that the original Moana was released just 9 years ago and the sequel came out only last year, it's surprising enough that 2026 will see the debut of a live-action version of the character. Yes, Disney is obviously obsessed with rebooting their animated catalogue, but after only 10 years? Perhaps this was to get Dwayne Johnson on screen as Maui as soon as possible, as the character and the story are clearly very important to The Rock. Not long after the People's Champion was confirmed to be reprising his role as Maui, came the news that Catherine Lagaya would be playing Moana herself. Now, it's not Lagaya that is the surprising aspect of this casting. It's more the fact that Moana won't be played by Auli'i Cravalho. Though she voiced the hero in both animated films, she won't be making the jump to live action along with Johnson, though she is attached to the project as an executive producer. And the reason why Cravalho has turned down the role is actually incredibly selfless and admirable. Simply put, rather than return, she wants to push for further representation and open the door for more young actors of Pacific Island descent. And this is where Lagaya will step in, to take the baton from Cravalho and bring Moana to life. Number 8, Carl Urban as Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat 2. Making movies is a team game. Rarely does the success of a project rest entirely on one person or one aspect of the film, but rather these are pieces in a much bigger puzzle. However, Mortal Kombat 2 may prove a slight exception to this. Following on from the first movie in 2021, fans of the gaming series were upset by the film adaptation being led by an original character in Lewis Tan's Cole Young. In spite of a lukewarm reception and box office numbers that left room for improvement, the sequel was greenlit, and with it came the announcement that Johnny Cage would feature. With a character this popular making his appearance, many feel it could be down to Johnny to right the wrongs of the first movie. So naturally, thoughts immediately turned to Cage, and more specifically, who would play the man, with fans casting names from Ryan Reynolds to Glenn Powell. Though some were more reasonable than others, audiences essentially wanted an action star who knows funny. Carl Urban, though fitting this criteria perfectly, was seemingly on absolutely nobody's radar. But now that he has signed on the dotted line, there is a lot to be excited about. He knows action. He has played egotistical, comedic characters before, and he can lend the sequel the kind of star power that it had otherwise been missing. Number 7, Colin Farrell as the Penguin in The Batman. With reboots, no matter how different a direction the new version of a story wants to go, what came before will always inform the expectations of what is to come. That is to say that whatever Matt Reeves was ever going to do with the Batman, the minute the Penguin was mentioned, minds would automatically go to the typical appearance of the character. The most comic-accurate classic on-screen look for the Penguin has come from Burgess Meredith in the 1966 series, and of course Danny DeVito in Batman Returns. Though Robin Lord Taylor's portrayal in Gotham looked to subvert expectations, Matt Reeves took his version of the character even further. At one point, Josh Gad was the favourite to take the villainous role opposite Robert Pattinson. Pattinson, before the surprising casting of Colin Farrell was ultimately announced. Farrell is no stranger to great villains, but the fact that he is an annoyingly handsome man would have seemingly disqualified him from consideration for Oswald Cobblepot straight away. Of course, we know now that this has gone on to be one of the best casting choices in recent years, as the Penguin stole every scene he was in and led one of the best TV shows of the year in 2024. He didn't even need to look a thing like Colin Farrell to do it. Number 6, Tom Holland as Nathan Drake in Uncharted. After years in development hell, with multiple writers and directors attached over the years, Sony's Uncharted finally released in 2022. The film had been in production for so long that Mark Wahlberg went from being cast as Nathan Drake to being cast as the adventurer's mentor and father figure, Victor Sullivan, instead. The role of Drake himself clearly could have gone to someone like Nathan Fillion, who showed he had the sarcasm, the look, and the understanding of the character in a short fan film, but instead it went to Tom Holland. This showed that Sony was going to go in a different direction with Uncharted than the games. Nothing like the typical Drake, but still far too old to play the young Drake from the flashbacks. This was far from what anyone would have pictured for the character. Tom Holland certainly didn't do a bad job in the role, even if he himself was rather critical afterwards. But he certainly did not fit the character in the way that most people would have expected to see him adapted from the games. Maybe Sony was just so impressed with Holland as Spider-Man that they wanted to hire him again. That's probably the most likely reason. Number 5, Matthew Lillard, Scott Foley, and David Arquette in Scream 7. The Scream franchise has seen something of a resurgence over the last few years, and the last few movies. Scream 7 is set to release in 2026, the casting of which will comprise a healthy mix of the new and the returning old, with both Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox appearing. Sidney Prescott and Gale Weathers aren't the only ones set to return though, as former killers Roman Bridger and Stu Marker have been confirmed as members of the cast. Add in the recent announcement that David Arquette will reprise his role as Dewey Riley, that gives Scream 7 3 men that audiences know to have died. Stu way back in Scream in 1996, Roman in Scream 3, and Dewey in 2022's Scream. Now, in fairness, this isn't the first time a dead character has returned to the franchise, as Skeet Ulrich portrayed Billy Loomis in 2022's Scream, 26 years after he was killed by Sidney Prescott in the original film. This was in the way of a hallucination of sorts, something that was revisited for Scream 6. But even so, to have 3 more deceased characters come back for one film is crazy. Number 4, Sigourney Weaver as Kiri in Avatar: The Way of Water. It's certainly not uncommon for an actor to play multiple roles in the same film. In recent years alone, look at Michael B. Jordan, who will play twins in Ryan Coogler's upcoming Sinners, Jim Carrey portraying 2 Robotniks in Sonic 3, and of course Robert Pattinson's multiple versions of Mickey Barnes in Mickey 17. With this in mind, it shouldn't be too surprising that Sigourney Weaver took on a second role for Avatar: The Way of Water. She portrayed Grace in the first Avatar film way back in 2009, and as well as reprising that role in a cameo of sorts in 2022, she portrayed in a more major role as Kiri. Though Grace died during the events of the first film, her avatar gave birth to Kiri, the 14-year-old character played by the actor in her 70s. Now, of course, the motion capture involved and Weaver playing the daughter of her original character, you can see how this was possible and why the decision was made. However, no one could have possibly had Sigourney Weaver playing a teenage girl in 2022 on their bingo card. Number 3, Harrison Ford as Thunderbolt Ross in Captain America: Brave New World. After making his MCU debut in The Incredible Hulk in 2008, William Hurt next portrayed Thunderbolt Ross in Captain America: Civil War in 2016, as the first real acknowledgement that the Hulk solo movie was still a part of the family. The character went on to be incredibly important, particularly in Civil War and Infinity War, and so after Hurt's sad passing in 2022, Ross was recast. Could anyone have ever predicted Harrison Ford taking on the role? The Hollywood legend has worked in big franchises before, the most obvious being the likes of Star Wars and Indiana Jones. While the latter is something that has become incredibly important to the man, his tough relationship with Star Wars has been well documented. Ford genuinely seems to hold a certain level of disdain for the franchise, and had been pushing for the death of Han Solo for some time. Harrison Ford joining another huge Disney franchise in Captain America: Brave New World, particularly with the motion capture involved as the Red Hulk, was as unexpected as it was exciting. Number 2, Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom in Avengers: Doomsday. As if it wasn't enough that Marvel Studios took to Hall H at San Diego Comic-Con 2024 to update the world on the 5th Avengers movie, and as if it wasn't enough that the change from the Kang Dynasty to Doomsday promised the MCU debut of one of the biggest bads the comics had to boast, the man to play Victor Von Doom was right there on the stage. Could anyone have expected Robert Downey Jr.'s face to be revealed as the next villain the Avengers would come together to face? For starters, RDJ as Tony Stark was the face of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for over a decade. He played Earth's greatest defender, and though there is bound to be a multiversal explanation as to why Stark and Doom look the same, seeing him as a villain just won't feel right. Then there's the fact that with his Oscar win for his performance as Lewis Strauss in Oppenheimer, it seemed as though the actor had well and truly moved on from Marvel. And yet there he stood as one of the most surprising Hall H reveals of all time. Naturally, this has been met with some skepticism, but Downey Jr. knows the MCU. He's a damn fine actor, and I, for one, can't wait for Doomsday to come. Number 1, Dwayne Johnson working with Martin Scorsese. No actor wants to get typecast into a specific role or style of film, but generally, when you see Dwayne Johnson's name attached to a movie, you know what you're in for. A fun 2 hours, certainly, but it isn't exactly going to be award-bait, cutting-edge cinema. The Rock was always going to be more likely to star in a buddy comedy alongside Kevin Hart than to work with someone like Martin Scorsese, until of course the latter actually happened. Recent reports have confirmed that Johnson will lead the legendary director's new film alongside Leonardo DiCaprio and Emily Blunt. This just isn't a combination you would put together, and it's a big step up for Johnson, who will play a mob boss fighting for control of the Hawaiian Islands criminal underworld. After multiple box office bombs in recent years, and his heightened presence in the WWE of late, particularly being in the center of a key story in the build-up to WrestleMania, many would have expected The Rock's movie work to perhaps take a bit more of a back seat for the foreseeable future, rather than out of the blue linking up with arguably the greatest director of his generation.